You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and today we got some longtime friends of the network on, the guys over at WPIC. Jacob Cooke's on the line today, and we want to dive into growth and what growth looks like. So talking to a lot of brands, we see the U.S. Total dollars being spent, being restricted, or at least being held onto and looking for bargains. And in this time, people still want to post a growth number. And when that posting a growth number in 2024 is looking, not as assured as the 2023 number was, people are looking outside the U.S. And this team here has helped so many brands grow outside the U.S. and a lot of it in China. And so going to definitely have an EU expansion talk for sure. But in this case, want to focus on the China opportunity, as well as the area, Southeast Asia, maybe Rakuten, Japan. But anyways, Jacob, I'll kick it over to you. If you want to do an intro on yourself and WPIC, that would be awesome.
Great. Okay. Just real quick, I think, we've been in the network for a long time. So for those that don't know us, I'm Jacob Cooke. I'm the CEO and co-founder of WPIC. We've been, in the area and in the market since 2009. Really kind of building a B2B business in those early days, helping sort of larger corporations like the Dabbers and the Honeywells become super successful here. And, over the years, maybe from the last 8 or 9 years, we've got a real strong focus on e-commerce, really working the B2C angle of the consumer in China. And that's everything from managing e-commerce stores to really becoming a growth partner for companies that don't have any presence out here, really building that e-commerce infrastructure, getting the compliance, getting the product imported, and taking care of the taxes and financial reconciliation, repatriation of capital. We have not only China's obviously our biggest market in APAC, but we also operate Japan and South Korea and Southeast Asia as well.
Awesome. So I want to jump off with we were just chatting beforehand around these conversations we're having with brands, which is, hey, like we talked about the EU, tons of different languages, different labeling requirements. It's definitely an episode we'll tackle, but China is a big one that's out there. But we get into these conversations and people just can't pull the trigger. And it's because, yes, they're super busy. They've got 150 different things on their plate, but it's like totally foreign, like in every sense of the word. Like they don't even know where to start. And they don't even know the size of the prize, which I think is where it starts. So I'd love to just pick your brain a little bit around that. Like, how do brands go about evaluating the size of the prize? Because if they see how big it is, that can kick off the next step, which we can get into as well, as how do we peel back the layers and overall put together a project plan to go tackle China? And I know, this obviously is what you guys do all day, every day. But I'm sure, you're having these same conversations and would love to just kind of peel back the onion at this one.
Yeah, we certainly are having those conversations. We are doing that all day, every day for the last, dozen or so years. When it comes down to it, you really need to look at a couple of things. And when we talk about going into markets like the EU and other places, there's usually a very strong retail footprint. What we have the advantage of here in Asia, and especially China, is an incredibly high mobile penetration rate for e-commerce. So we've actually surpassed the 50% mark of retail sales now being done online in China, and actually 80% of all sales being influenced online. The 2022 numbers in terms of, e-commerce was about 1.4 trillion US. So just a massive size of prize here. Really overlapping anything else that we see. And, that number is expected, to rise quite significantly. You have to look, I think, also at more specific data in terms of your sector. There are economic headwinds in China that relate to the real estate sector and less people buying apartments. So when you see consumption pulling back in large durable, like home appliances, it's actually stepping up quite a bit in things like tourism and hobbies and different types of fashion, athleisure, anything related to a healthy lifestyle. And companies that we work with, like Lululemon and Nike, are doing extremely well in these categories. And there's a lot of US and and overseas brands that are doing quite well here, that are taking that data and really understanding sort of where they fit in market. And we're happy to share this. We publish a lot of this stuff on our website. We give a lot of this stuff away to people that call us so they have a really good understanding. Is their product market fit for what we're trying to do globally? In a lot of cases, if they can sort of fit within that lifestyle that's really emerging here post-pandemic, then I think they're going to do quite well. In terms of, the barriers to entry, that's really why, we started the firm initially to sort of take care of all those. We're a firm of about 400 people, but we operate in a whole bunch of different silos in the department. That's everything from data and analytics to creative and with the digital labs team and the creative labs team, as well as working on the infrastructure. So that's the Tmall stores, the JD stores, all of this, as well as we have 3 now fulfillment facilities handling all the logistics. And that, if that needs to be from a bonded free trade zone or a general trade warehouse, we've got all of those covered. So really, we kind of are that one-stop shop now for being that growth partner in Asia. So I think, it can be tough. There's certainly things that the brands have to do in terms of creating the inventory, getting the inventory mixes right. But in terms of all the complexities and the compliances, we've really kind of got pretty good systems. You dial into our software, you log in, you really get to see what's going on in real time and in English. So we take care of the language barriers as well.
So if so going category by category, you can just pull out, are there any that people should stay away from? I mean, I know you said like right now, so real estate, you think the housing spot, the bigger appliances, then it's opening up these others, but are there still what about supplements?
Supplements is doing incredibly well. That's an area that is absolutely booming. We've seen, high double-digit growth since the pandemic. And that's really goes back to that trend I was talking about before, where health and wellness has now been a big thing. It took off during the pandemic. People started taking better care of themselves. And those habits have really kept going post-pandemic as we've gone back into an open world. People are going outdoors more. They're taking into hobbies. Mother, baby, and these types of things are headed down basically due to demographics. It's not that there's still not money to be made for good innovative products there, but pet, for example, is taking off almost inversely to that. So there's a lot of things. Smaller home appliances are doing really well too, as long as they're innovative and they provide value, and you can sort of get that message across to the consumer about how this is going to make my life better. But yeah, washing machines, microwaves, these types of things are definitely, down probably 13, 14%. And that's the second year of declines we've seen in large durable. So when you put everything together, the overall consumption market is up single digits. Online is up about 11 or 12. But when you take out those certain categories that we all know are not going to be coming back for several years, consumption is still rising in the around the mid-teens in China. So strong numbers that we can certainly work with.
So if I'm doing a total evaluation, so I'm looking back 8 years, right? Where, I was putting together a China launch plan, and it just spent some time over there. And there's a big push for, they wanted us in-store presence, or they wanted a huge US presence. They wanted, that branding. And then I think about in the US market where, that was great, but then we see all these other brands just popping up, direct to consumer brands, which might want to tackle, growth outside the US, but they just don't have the 10-year brand presence that other brands have. Is those old barriers that I was facing, are those now knocked down? Is it easier for a startup brand or a brand that's been around for 5 years rather than 20 years? Those open opportunities more than they were before?
We look at this two ways. I think, again, because you have the high penetration rate online, if you looked at market entry strategies for China, 15 years ago, they almost always included a huge offline component, with online really being secondary. What we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years, definitely a willingness of more brands to go with an online only strategy and wait to see how that goes for a couple of years. There's obviously good foot traffic in malls, good exposure, but it really doesn't compare to the millions of people that watch a single influencer online. So you're talking about bringing attention to your brand. The influencer and live streaming market right now is much more powerful than retail. We've actually seen pullbacks in malls, commercial real estate kind of, be headed down here. And actually what's going on now, though, we see a little bit of a revival because there's so many subsidies out there that local governments are giving to people to move into these retail malls. So we expect it to come back a little bit, but, primarily I'd say now almost half the brands that we deal with are coming into China in an online only strategy, which of course is obviously way cheaper, way easier to do as well.
100%. I mean, it just allows just about any brand to jump over there. I mean, just like it is in the US, right? It's easy to start up, not as easy as it was 2 years ago, but it's easy to kick off a brand that's only online. No, that is, I think what I hope to do is just, I think you're in the same spot, is like allow these US brands to realize that it's not that hard, right? With the right partner. You're going to go do it on your own. I mean, I wouldn't do it personally, but with the right partner, it can be done, and you don't have to be the $100 million brand that you used to have to be. Well,
yeah, and look, I think if you look at a lot of the missteps, it has been some people who tried to do it on their own. Maybe they've done it on their own in other English speaking markets. They moved to the US into Canada, the US into Australia. They hired, they knew it. That's been tough to do. I think even just in terms of HR challenges, just different regulations in terms of how you hire, how you structure companies, how you keep up with the pace of change, even in the knowledge, can be really tough for somebody to come in and try to sort of build that enterprise. Not only is it expensive, but you certainly have a very long time horizon. It also requires a huge commitment for management to spend a lot of time over here.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a time where everybody wants a return on investment, in the next quarter, in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Is there, like, how should people be thinking about launch cost as a whole? Go to market, marketing, all that, because I know that's a barrier. Well, it's a barrier from the standpoint of they don't understand what needs to be done. And so,
yeah. So I think even at the outset, if you're talking sort of completely new brand, maybe even a new product that doesn't have an existing category, I mean, your time horizon is going to be around the 9 to 12 months to become profitable. If you're already here, maybe you had a misstep, but there's some brand awareness, and we've gotten brands quite profitable in 3 months. If you're coming into a category where you've got some advantage, you're probably 2 quarters from having really good success here. And that's probably, about normal. Some brands can speed that up with initial branding expenses if they really want to get going. And, 3 to 6 months, they can engage expensive celebrities and influencers to get the message out there. Might not bring a positive ROI, but it'll certainly bring in the revenue, confidence in the product, return purchase, and these types of things. They can speed up that scale. But if you're looking for most efficiency in terms of money spent, if you're a completely new product, the worst I think we've ever seen is kind of at that year mark.
Yeah. Is there a percentage on GMV that you should expect to spend on marketing for launch?
We try to get up to about that 6 to 1, 7 to 1 after the first year. We like to do a little bit of branding at month 1 where we won't put a ROAS on that. And then, you're probably going to cut up around, this is really depends on the category, but if you're in tough to some categories that are, let's say apparel or nutraceuticals, where they're big categories existing in, there's not a lot of innovation in there. You're probably looking, coming up in like the 1.5, and then slowly building up about a point each month, 2, 2.5, 3, and then you get up to 6 or 7 by the end of the year. And that's where most brands put them in a pretty profitable position.
Yeah, that's. But why shouldn't a brand try it? Where do you see people making mistakes? I mean, we know. I mean, you were just mentioning when they don't find a great partner. I mean, that was my biggest.
One of the things is, and if we're going right now, inventory. I think that sometimes you can take a look at all the data in the market, and you might not get especially in apparel, really tricky to predict what are going to be your best sellers. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of cases, the tricks that we have in those categories is that you got to get that right, because normally you're going to have one run for one season, and then, making a whole bunch of mediums in that particular size can be pretty tough. So you really got to get that right. You got to have some great knowledge and really be looking at the information, the data. So the more that you run, you start to get a really good understanding of what works here in the market. And then really it is inventory supply. I mean, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, it's a good problem to have. But when you have domain and influencers, right? When we talk about ROAS before, performance marketing, it's really easy where we know, hey, we did a 1.5 last month. We're going to do a 2 this month, $30,000. And it's going to give us $60,000 out. Very basic math. With the influencer marketing, you can actually do much better than that. And it really depends if you get the right influence in the right market. They could clear out your inventory in 45 minutes to an hour. So, this is challenging, I think, as we're moving into more of this live streaming now. It's, out of It could be actually up to 600 billion this year. We don't have numbers from Douyin, but I mean, that's just phenomenally large parts of the market. And that's very different where they're bringing, you know, products to the people as opposed to people to the products. And you know how much you're paying for those people, you know how many products you've got. That's all very easy math calculations. The live streamers have kind of thrown that math up. So yeah, keeping enough inventory and being able to get it is good, and being flexible. So the brands that have much closer access to their factories and productions that work on smaller cycles, I think, are the ones that will really be able to benefit from that TikTok Douyin experience that's going out here, right? Really going off out here right now.
Yeah. Do you want to dive into Douyin just a little bit so everybody understands? And then I want to talk about live streaming for sure.
Yeah, so Douyin is kind of short form, live form video. I mean, it's basically TikTok, the same company, just a different model out here. In terms of monetization, they have really dominated e-commerce. So when we look at this, of the traditional Tmall's or Amazon's, I'm looking for a pair of pants. I go on there, I search pants, I get 10,000 results. I choose the best pair of pants for me. But when I went into those platforms like Tmall or Amazon, I usually had a predetermined intent to purchase. Just a little bit of shopping around for sales and things like that. They know if I'm interested in golf, I'm going to get recommendations for golf products, but they don't get too far off of my previous shopping habits. When you look at influencers and things like that going on in Douyin, you have shops that are live that are basically just making product suggestions. So I went there with maybe an idea that, hey, I'm here to buy some cool stuff, but I had no idea before logging into that show what I was going to buy. It really kind of changes the dynamic and really replicates more of that. I'm just going to the mall to shop.
Yeah,
that's what I was going there for a specific thing, or that younger female especially, where they just really captured that demographic very, very well. And that in Asia is an extremely powerful demographic. We call it that almighty 27-year-old female, but it really is that middle sweet spot in there, really starting to earn money. Lots of disposable income and loves to shop, and it's a powerful demographic that Douyin has absolutely cornered.
Yeah, are there other like platforms? Because I think predominantly, people are thinking about Tmall Global, right? That's probably the major platform, and I think it's a limited view. I think there's so many different platforms there now that people can move product on or advertise on, that it makes moving product and getting to these, months, not years, return on investment that you're talking about. And I think that's where I think people's brain break was like, I tried 5-6 years ago. We talked to Tmall Global, we went to Hangzhou, we walked around the campus, and then nothing happened. And there's so many different levers to pull now that I think it's easier. It's why we can get brands that have only been around a few years to take off.
And that's really kind of WPIC's bread and butter. What we like to do is we call it a single source inventory. So we have, a huge call center. We've got several warehouses. We've got software that basically spreads creative assets, the same customer support team, the same inventory into multiple front-end platforms. And even through the free trade warehouses that we've set up, we actually do that not only just in China, but into Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia as well, from the same fulfillment centers. I mean, generative AI has basically allowed us to take model shoots and photo shoots that we do in China, send it to Diffusion, and have those engines basically just change the models from Chinese to Korean. And you can absolutely not tell at all that they weren't done. You have to take some original shots, but maybe even in the future, we probably won't even need to do that. AI, in terms of their ability to help us work over multiple languages in Southeast Asia, is very powerful, but really it's almost irrelevant for the brands. I mean, we look at that, we want to be using also a lot of the AI that we're developing right now to move advertising dollars around where we have the lowest acquisition costs. So you might have Bilibili or Kuaishou actually being cheaper for acquiring customers on certain days than Douyin, but allow us to sit there and manage that and move those dollars around where we're getting those cheapest customers. And that's Tmall, that's JD, whatever. That doesn't need to be a huge concern from the brand side of things. What they need to know is that the creative assets that are put on those platforms are within brand, the brand being represented properly, everything sticking to within the price structures that they wanted to. But we look at those all basically as advertising platforms. And who's ever got the cheapest ads to acquire that cheapest customer, that's where we want to move that budget and that dollar amount around as quickly as possible. And AI has been a great tool to allow us to do that.
just so it's totally full service. Like I'm just sitting back from, the brand side. Like, why wouldn't I?
Yeah. And if you talk to Team,
why wouldn't I? Yeah.
And if you talk to Douyin, they're going to sell Douyin. And I think that's where we really come into play, where we're just going to do that all for you. And I think people are kind of too hung up in, hey, do I go on that platform or that platform? It's really insignificant. What you need to know is that those platforms are going to move up and down in market share all the time. Certain ones are going to be subsidized and they're going to be giving out coupons. You're going to want to take advantage of all of that, quite frankly. But in terms of your success in market, that's something you got to let your partner decide. And that is going to move and be very dynamic on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I do want to jump in, as I think we're just 10 days out from Singles Day, is how much actually moves and the total opportunity that's there. I want to make sure. I mean, it'd be crazy if we didn't tackle that, right? Like, if you want to walk through Singles Day really quick, it's dwarfs Prime Day. I mean, it makes Prime Day look small, like an average day, right?
Well, let's get down to the meat and potatoes here. As we've had sort of JD and Tmall compete for big numbers in both the 6/18 and 11/11 festivals, they've been stretching this holiday out. So our pre-sale period for 11/11 actually started on the 28th of October. And before that, there was a lot of what we call pre-heating. We ran a couple of sales that actually did extremely well. We had, unfortunately, a couple of stores that sold out even before we started 11/11. We just, again, you get the right influencer and they just blew inventory out. So, we've got a lot of planes on the way over here, hopefully to get filled up before the 11th. But this is really now turned into about a 2-week festival. Building now, it's because we still call it Singles Day Festival, but it's a 2-week festival. So you're going to hear extraordinary numbers. We're probably going to get up close to 150 billion, I suspect. At this 11/11, it's going to be record setting, and everything that we've seen from the numbers initially are very, very strong. That's not something that TikTok or Douyin really participates in either. So what you're probably going to see closer to the end of the month and in between 12/12 is them to start running some different promotions and more influencers, while Tmall and JD have really taken the attention away from them. But yeah, it's massive. This is the 12th, at least the 12th. We should know this, 12th or 13th now. One of these shopping festivals, and we've just seen incredible growth year over year. Brands have really started to prepare for this, as we have since beginning of August. Where people are working well past midnight, they will be taken care of for that. Don't worry. But it's hard work, but it's a lot of fun and it's very rewarding at the same time.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to do this spread out to 2 weeks. Maybe it'll go 3 weeks. It's pretty much what used to be Cyber 5 here, right? Like, all these sales, the Black Friday sales, start a month in advance.
And I think we've gotten really good at it because you could beat the crap out of your warehouse at the same time, but now we've really integrated, so we know what we're going to put on sale. We've got general expectations of what's being sold. So a lot of this stuff has been pre-packaged. It's not just being picked from the rack. We've actually packaged it on the racks too. So really, it's just kind of labeling stickers. This stuff comes in, and we're getting to be pretty efficient. Most of those orders that we're going to be shipped are going to come into that warehouse same day, and at the busiest day, you're going to have by the lunch the next day.
Awesome. And live streaming, just really starting to take off here in the States. Mm-hmm. But you were mentioning how big it is already. And what I love about it is it allows smaller brands to jump in and to sell a lot and grow some brand recognition without huge production costs, right? And everything else that used to go into a major marketing campaign. And then you would hope at the end of the day, you kind of stitch together what the return on investment was. But do you see that just completely moving to the US as well? It's just booming there, right?
I can't really see how it can. We have actually been pulled in to consult with the largest US platforms as well. I don't need to give you the names, but you're going to know exactly who they are, really discussing this trend and how it's popped off. And I think that number is now getting 60 to 80 billion. Am I right about that in the US in terms of what's going on in live streaming?
Yeah. On the high
in 2019. Yeah. In 2019, we were less than that here. So that whole trend was really within 4 years. I would absolutely expect it to pop up. We've also seen TikTok launch these sort of test markets, Malaysia, Philippines, the UK, they're doing quite well in those markets as well. Not public, not getting all of their numbers, but just in terms of what we've seen with their timelines and in rolling out different markets, they've upped their timeline. So whatever they're seeing in terms of that data, they're clearly liking and really, double timing towards getting live throughout the rest of the world. There's really two types of live streaming that we talk about here. There's the influencers, where we pay for somebody else's channel to host our products, which is what you're talking about, getting really good audiences. And there's also, we have about 13 studios, as well as a whole bunch of AI studios that we actually broadcast ourselves. And the economics of that are obviously a lot better. We keep the margins, but we can do some creative things. Like, we talk about some small appliances or some of our food brands. We might go to a 5 or 6 star hotel, work in the kitchens and do some cooking during the off times, and run some cooking shows. And we'd like to do stuff like that. Really get out there. We've done some stuff with Ducati. The really creative, good stuff that we're doing with the brands. Apple's now doing this as well. They're doing their own studios. We've seen apparel brands, especially into sort of younger female consumers, now being able to get up to that $150, $200 million mark in their own individual live streams. These influencers are still over the $1 billion in terms of what they can do. But really, I think we're seeing a rise of the ladder in terms of the individuals setting up studios and producing more of that content themselves. Vacuum brands are doing it for innovative pet products is really good. I think they work well in that format. We're also flying influencers out all over the world. We've got nutraceutical brands that we've taken really huge influencers to the actual production facilities to talk about how clean it is, to really show how these products are made. And they're doing, like $250,000 in 15 minutes sometimes, which more than covers the cost of bringing them out there. So always trying to think of new ideas that we can really innovate in that space and bring new content to consumers, because we don't always want to be doing what everybody else is doing. Like, everybody's live streaming. We want to be ahead of that, usually, and doing things. But, there are massive big names out here in the live streaming business that actually do cameos in movies. To think about how opposite that is in the US, the stars are doing cameos on maybe some shows if they were launching their own brands. But these people are literally more popular and more well watched than movie stars, which is just insane when you think about it. So huge brand power.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it from the standpoint of, how can you not give it a try? At this point in time, you can't afford to not at least give it a try. And I'm a huge fan of an R&D budget in the digital and the e-commerce group, where they get a chunk of cash that they just get to play around with. Like R&D, it's going to be gone, right? There may be an ROI behind it. There may not be this year, but over time there will be an ROI. But allow them to play in different areas. And this is just one of those where I don't see, how you can at least give it a whirl and collect all that data and then report back, hey, we dipped our toe in and this happened. If we jump all in, this is the expectation that this will happen. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you shouldn't dip your toe in. I'd love to hear your thoughts there. Is there a way to dip your toe in? This is the old adage, right?
Unfortunately, there's really not. We talk about this too, right? It's because these shows are so well watched. They don't have the ability to sell 100 units. They have the ability to sell 1,000 units. And you might be able to dip your toe in and give them 10,000. I'm just going to run this for 3 or 4 minutes, and that's fine. That'll be part of the show. No, we like to have brands have kind of a revenue target that first year of about $1 million. And that's kind of, if you're talking about dipping your toe in, that's kind of dipping your toe in for us. It's a tough place, with all the complexities in these studios and just the massive sizes of the platforms to come in and do, low 6 figures in that first year. But, you're dipping the toe in is kind of, we'd say $1 million.
Okay. No, that's awesome. Outside of China, you said you're also in South Korea. Would love to hear that it goes beyond that. Like, any intricacies there, or does it automatically just trickle over and it's easy? What about like Rakuten in Japan?
Yeah, I think that, we've been in Japan for 3 years. We've been in Southeast Asia for about 1.5 years. We are just getting into Korea now. We have about half a dozen stores there. Out of all those ones, I kind of wish I'd started in Korea than Japan. Japan is a tough one on regulatory, especially in nutraceuticals. Can be confusing ingredients that have actually different names or different translations. think there's like 55,000 of them on the ingredient ban for that particular category. But however, you know, you have really high disposable income stuff that's on the higher end. The more expensive imported products do quite well there. And there's not a lot of local competition. So the brands that do hit it off in Japan do quite well. And a lot of those regulatory, you can also maybe look at it as a moat. So if you can, you know, put up with the 3 or 4 months to go live, which is probably going to be twice as long as China, you can do quite well. And again, for us, when we look at the overall sort of GMV of every market that we operate at, 1.3, 1.4 is really coming from China. Then we have another about 30-40% being added on top of that. So we operate kind of in about the 1.8 trillion GMV in those markets. So we love to use China as a base, but there's situations where somebody's got a distributor in China, an agreement they can't get out of, and we start on the periphery. And, you know, once we built that up, we go into China. But look, we use a lot of the warehousing here. We use a lot of the call centers in China that are routed here. We try to do a lot of the creative production in China. And that really makes it, you know, economies of scale and really efficient for us operating over there. You know, Korea's been a real dream come true in terms of how easy that's been, but logistics facilities have to come from our facilities. We actually just opened a new facility. You're going to hear about this in the news on Friday in Weihai, China, which is actually the easternmost tip that is basically a 6-hour boat ride from Korea. And just adding that 6 hours, we've actually been able to almost take 75% off logistics costs into the country. So that's been pretty powerful and a really good example of just, you know, when you're operating and taking a look at this region as one market, really allows you to kind of, you know, just do things really efficiently as opposed to going into Korea by itself and, you know, maybe being a little bit more expensive. When we look at this, the more countries you're operating in this region, the cheaper it gets. And our clients have been the ones really pushing us to do this. You know, they've seen success in China. We kept number one getting pushed. Hey, can you do Japan? Can you go to Japan? Hey, we'll figure it out with you. And now we've got a great team over there. We've got, you know, really experienced people who be able to attract really good talent. Slowed down during the pandemic a bit, of course, not being able to get to the country. And really happy with the team that we've got in Korea too. We're a real fun market to work in so far. And Southeast Asia, I mean, if you look at the logistics networks, we send everything to Shenzhen on a daily basis. And from Shenzhen, they're set up to service all 8 of those countries. We operate in some of them. We don't operate in Myanmar. But, you know, and of course, most of those platforms in Southeast Asia are owned by Chinese. You know, Lazada owned by Alibaba. And you have Shopee, which is really Tencent invested. So makes working with those from here pretty good. But in Korea and Japan requires a lot more on the ground, local marketing knowledge to really drive demand.
Yeah. I mean, I've been picking your brain for a while. Any questions? You know, I always like to give people the opportunity. I'm incredibly thankful for, I mean, what you guys do for the brands, the network, and the educational opportunities. And but I also would love it. I don't know if you have questions you want to throw my way. More than happy to.
You know, certainly I do. You know, one of the things is, you know, there's been a lot of negative press that's just been about China and the slowing down or this economic collapse happening. And of course, you know, it never did. But, you know, the whole time we've been reading record profits for Lululemon. Every earnings report that's basically been coming out has been showing just huge spots of growth. And then sometimes, you know, reports have come out like Nike, highest growth market that they have globally. Now, since the pandemic's been up, and I've seen so many executives, you know, in the business class lounges and you know, on the flights and the trains now coming back, is that sentiment starting to change? Do you see, you know, people being a little bit more about, you know, this is a market that really can't be ignored, especially as growth is slowing down in the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. I think it's a variety of things. I think, you know, if there's the scarcity of, you know, product as a whole, we had a couple years where there were next to no discounts here in the U.S. because, you know, I mean, you think normal, you get into Q4, massive discounting, but people just didn't have product. So now we're at a point where people have product, but when I kind of track it, you know, it seems like, and I think I've said this on an earlier episode, the podcast, that like in somewhere January, February, people ran out of money. In August, September, they ran out of credit. And so a lot of brands were like down in the US, and they're not negative, but they're just, the growth isn't there at the same rate it was before. So now you're in a spot where you've got the inventory. So you can go outside the US, right? If you want to, because you have the available inventory. And then the numbers are slowing down and nobody wants to post a negative number. And so, you know, I think, you know, a lot of times, like when times are great, that people look for excuses why they shouldn't have to go anywhere else and make their job any harder. And, adding on another country, especially China, is a lot of work. And I know you guys make it really easy for a lot of brands in the network. They absolutely love you guys. You make it really easy, but still it's an added, complication to a current job. And when numbers are up and everything's going great, why add it? And so we're at a spot now where whether or not it's tied to the housing market, economic, I totally agree with you. It's neither here nor there. It's more personally related. Like, oh wait, I need to hit a number. And I can think of any reason I want to why I'm not going to go to China right now. And there's no money there, and it's the economic collapse. No, they just didn't want to have to go, but now they're almost forced to go. They've got the inventory. They can't say no. Slowing sales in the US. They got to find new people to buy, and it's not, the customer acquisition cost is through the roof. Profitability is like the focus of 90% of my conversation. So we can't go spend more money on marketing, or we can't do deeper discounts. And so we're at a point now where I think now they're starting to really look and say, oh, look, it's turning around.
That's good to hear. That is really good to hear. Of course, I was here for the whole pandemic, and, my brother was based overseas, who's now actually even relocated to Shanghai as well.
Really?
That's good. Because
Joseph's over there now?
Oh, cool. Yeah. So we've got both of us now here. And we're opening a ton of offices throughout the world. It's really our initiative is to kind of just dig in deeper here, expand, grow, lean in while we can. And that's good to hear, because certainly it's been a lot busier on our side too, but there's really a lot more we can be doing out there. And a lot of the conversations that we are having with brands, you're right. I mean, it's, go back a couple of years, it was kind of 45, 50, 60 days and we were getting up and going live. And, now it's been, some of these conversations are dragging on for months. And I think that, there's always been sources of truth for us, information, and what, the American Chamber of Commerce has been really good, along with the other countries' business associations, whether that's BridgeCham or the Canadian Business Council. The earnings reports are really telling, despite what you might be seeing in a slowing economy. I mean, you start to read the Fortune 100 earnings reports, somewhere they are listing what's coming from China. It's been an incredibly good year for a lot of them. So yeah, that's great. It's really good to hear. It's been a long time since I've spent a lot of time in the States. We're so focused on out here, but hope to get out to that part of the world before the end of the year and meet a lot of people. But really, it's just simple. Pick up the phone and we can talk through a lot of this stuff. And if it works, I think in terms of, how we engage too, I mean, we found real flexible ways to engage with big brands. We work with the biggest ones, but we also work with, people that only do 10 or 25 million globally. So we've got pretty flexible models, where we can come in and get that direct to consumer model pretty live for you right away. And at pretty reasonable cost, certainly less than the cost of opening a single retail outlet. So, I think
hiring 5 people over there. Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, the other thing is there's direction too. I mean, people need direction in this space, and I mean, you've been a great partner providing that for a ton of brands, and that's it. It's like demystifying it, right? In the absence of knowledge, like people assume the worst, and so when they don't really know, that it's incredibly complicated and it could never work, or they have. Maybe they're like me, they're 7-8 years ago in completely different landscape, and all the hurdles were that I was dealing with. Most of them those barriers have been broken down now. And the other like key stuff or neat stuff that you see popping up as we kind of get to the end here. And I know you've got a flight to get on. Where are you flying to?
I'm just headed to Shanghai. Actually, we've got CIEE coming up, which is the China Import-Export show. This is probably the largest trade show in the world. It's coming back pretty big this year, but keep an eye on this in 2024. It's going to be it's going to be everybody really coming into this. Book your hotel rooms early, because this is a monster. This is taking place in the largest expedition center right by the Hongqiao airport, and every country's going to be there. All the big brands are going to be there. And really kind of, a lot of the buyers and stuff like that too. So a ton of business is getting done next week, and we're just getting prepared. We've got 3 booths. I think we're representing about 18, 19 brands there this year as well as a lot of ambassadors and diplomats, et cetera, walking through there. So we've got a real busy week coming up. But that's kind of happening the same time as 11/11. So, we had to bring in a lot of international staff to come and help us with this, because a lot of people on the ground are pretty busy with that. So it's good actually to get everybody for all WPIC global offices in the same country at one time too. So going to get a little bit of a party, I think, next week too as well. So looking forward to that.
Yeah. Any like key takeaways as we kind of wrap up this episode?
I think just look at the market's in good shape. There's certain challenges, there's sectors, but if you pull it out and want to look at what's going on in your sector here, more than likely if the consumer's changing, it's resilient. We're kind of going through this generational change now, but for us, we're able to work through this and really find a ton of growth for brands in this market. So between that and between even more powerful AI coming out next year, I think it's a great time to get in these markets that are probably pretty right for you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jacob. Tell Joseph I said hi. He's been a long friend as well, and that's cool that he's going to be over there with you. That's awesome. And thanks again for all you guys do for all the different brands in the network as a whole. Again, Jacob Cooke from WPIC. I think is it WPIC.co.com?
.co. Yeah. .co.
Yeah, WPIC.co. Check them out. They're great friends, partners, supporters of the network for a long time now. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. Thanks again, Jacob.
Thank you. See ya.